I would like to acknowledge the land we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with the country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people are the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today.
Now for an acknowledgement of country used by the Hendon Preschool in group time each morning.
Here is the land, here is the sky, here are my friends, and here am I. Hands up, hands down, we are learning on Kaurna land.
You might notice in the picture that there's a beautiful coolamon, and that was painted by one of our previous students, Wayne. My name's Ayla Lever. I'm the senior leader at Hendon Preschool.
And I'm Katie Skibberus, and this presentation today is going to talk about our journey together when I was in the role of behaviour support coach for Hendon Preschool beginning in 2018. We're going to talk to you today about a journey towards trauma-informed practice at the preschool, and we've specifically called it a journey towards because we recognise that we're not fully yet there, and that we may never be there, but we have a endpoint in sight and a focus in sight towards providing these children at this site with true trauma-informed practice.
The why. Why did we start this journey? Well, it started in about 2018, and we were very concerned about the staff wellbeing. We almost felt like we'd hit a brick wall, and our toolbox was empty. We'd tried all the strategies that we knew, and we needed some support. So we did a referral, and Katie came aboard.
So that was a behaviour support referral. So the preschool rang up and completed a consult with the behaviour support coach, which was myself. And from there, I came out, and we will share with you later on the journey of professional development and support on site that I provided.
I should also mention here that our AECD data had come back, and our children were at risk or vulnerable in 4 out of the 5 domains. We started looking at what we're doing and shifting our lens into where we want to go. So an example of this is our identity poster. We got Katie to have a look at what we're currently doing and looking at it through a trauma-informed lens on where we could go with the child as the focus.
So on the left is the initial poster that they started off with, or the initial outline, and they use this at the beginning of each year as a bit of a way of getting to know the children that are coming into the preschool, and for parents and caregivers to have an opportunity to be involved in this as well. On the left, what they started with was perhaps we've called it quite a glitzy, glamorous, quite often the parent or caregiver's homework, moving
Absolutely.
towards a really authentic representation that's made by the child of self, with a photo of the child at the centre, which represents that the child really is at the centre of everything that they do. Supporting the site with professional development was a huge element of the work that I did as behaviour support coach. It's quite a long and extensive journey. Some of it had begun before I came on board. The whole staff had completed the SMART online training, which is a free set of modules that you can complete at your own pace, and it's free to all department employees. Later on in the presentation at the end, we'll provide you with more resources and some links around these trainings as well. The leadership of the site had completed the Berry Street education model, and they had applied as well through the Preschools Initiative to be part of the Trauma Aware School application process, which is held in partnership with the Engagement and Wellbeing Directorate. And again, we'll refer to that and the mechanics of that later on in the presentation in the resource section. The next component was that I came along to one of their staff meetings and we looked at the real basics of trauma-informed practice. The site a year or so before had also completed the 2-hour SMART professional development and decided that they needed a bit of a refresher. So we looked at some really key components such as attachment theory, mirror neurons, neuroplasticity, and the window of tolerance. And from there we developed a bit of a roadmap together about where to next. The next thing that I did was I came out to the site on a number of occasions, and some of these were planned, some of these were unplanned, that I was there for other meetings, and I noticed things. And I noticed and I named and I supported the staff on the floor as things were happening to see where there was trauma-informed practice occurring, where there was opportunity for it to occur, and where perhaps it was occurring but they were not doing it with intent. From there, we went on to do a SMART practice site audit tool that we modified specifically for a preschool context. We'll share examples of this later on in the presentation. As part of the whole school inclusion is the Trauma Aware School initiative, they were also able to access support through Connected Self, which involved a number of pupil free days where the whole school, all the SSOs, all the groundsmen, everyone who was involved in that school shared a responsibility in attending the training and reflective practice sessions following. And finally, the last bit that we've just done in the last kind of year together is the OLT, so the Online Training Australia Trauma and Attachment Theory course, which is available through CERU. Strategies in action. So this is what I mentioned about doing what we do with intent. So doing it at the right time, for the right reason, and for the right child. Whatever strategies that you try through a trauma-informed practice lens, we come from a point of do no harm. They're great practice and great educational practice across the board. But what we did want to do was use the practice that was occurring at Hendon Preschool with intent. So I'm going to get Ayla to use an example of this around song and rhyme time.
One of the examples with our songs is when we're gathering as for a group, and if we need to wind down, we intentionally sing songs that are forcing the children to breathe slower and really relax their bodies as they're doing the actions and the songs.
Another example is that they've set up a hammock outside, and we know that that rocking of side to side is quite calming. If we look back and connect it to attachment theory and trauma-informed practice, it replicates the rocking movement potentially in the womb or like the rocking of a baby. And so staff were able to direct, pre-teach, support children to access that hammock as they needed to calm. But they were also able to support them to use the net swing outside when they needed to increase their arousal levels, because we know that the swinging front to back as opposed to side is going to bring them up into that ready to learn zone and increase their arousal levels.
One of the initiatives that Katie introduced had a big impact on our practice was the SMART practice audit tool. This was an opportunity where all of our staff were able to get together and do an audit on our environment, looking at our current practice and opportunities for practice.
So we used the SMART practice acronym, which is an acronym developed by the Australian Childhood Foundation, which stands for predictable, responsive, attuned, connecting, translating, calming, and engaging. And we looked at what practice was happening as a whole site, but then also the opportunities for practice. And we then connected it, which you can see along the right-hand side of the book, to the neurobiology of trauma. So the neurobiology and the science supporting what we're doing on the left-hand side of the page. This became part of a larger floor book, and you can see the ring binding at the centre there. that was a really true living, breathing document that all staff would access and add to. So you can see the difference in the colour of the text, and that this happened and was built upon over quite a number of months and even exists today. We're going to share with you now a couple of slides that are examples from the floor book. You'll see at the top of the page, it outlines the specific space in which the SMART practice framework is to be audited. So for this one, it's the floor and open space play. And for the next one, it's mat time. For the previous one that you've seen already, it's their outdoor play space. You can modify this yourselves and use specific places in the context of your own preschool or kindy. As we look at this last slide about table work in terms of the examples of the SMART practice site audit tool, I'd like to draw to your attention that this can occur at a QDTP level, so a differentiated teaching practice across the board at that whole universal wave, but it can also help inform your individualised planning. And I'm going to invite Ayla now to give a bit of an example about a student at the preschool a number of years back where we did just that.
So the child we're talking about is definitely the most challenging child that I've ever taught.
And we had both the behaviour support and special educator and speech pathologist where there's buy-in involved as well, didn't we?
That's right.
So there was quite a team around the child and quite a strong relationship with the carer as well.
That's right, yes. We wanted some strategies on how to support the educators and both this child to have a successful learning at the preschool.
So you used some of his strengths, didn't you? He built on them.
That's right. He was a keen footballer. So we organised times in the day for him to be able to go out and kick the football. Sometimes this was one-on-one, sometimes it was with a group of other children.
And again, it was about linking it to that neurobiology of trauma and that intent. So it wasn't just to blow off steam to go and kick a football. It was to kick with that rhythmic, repetitive, calming attunement with an adult, drawing on those mirror neurons of the other adult co-regulating with him.
That's right, and it really worked. It was a time where he was able to really calm and then re-enter the environment.
And he was quite artistic too, wasn't he?
He was. In fact, I think it was the painted Coolerman at the beginning of the slideshow was painted and designed by him.
And that's about engaging his senses other than, I guess, his verbal capacity or him listening to something, to be able to give him that tactile experience to ground him to the here and now.
That's right.
We don't have time to share with you all of those strategies that we've developed over a number of years now. But what we are going to talk through now are a couple of specific simple ideas that you might like to modify for your own preschool and context. So the first one is as easy as using the child's name. It might be the first time they've actually heard their name used. Quite often our children who have experienced extensive developmental trauma have been either not acknowledged by a name at all or called multiple other names. It might be the first time they've heard their name used in a positive tone of voice, and they may associate their name with shame. So it might be associated with the trauma when they're actually having their name used. By using their name, you acknowledge that they're a person and a person worthy of spoken to by name. You can use this across the waves of intervention, so at whole group time, which we'll talk about a bit later in terms of circle time and mat time, in small groups and also individually.
After our acknowledgement of country each morning, we do a group time activity, and this is a time where we go around the circle and the children greet and say the name of the person who's sitting next to them. This helps the children to learn each other's names and also acknowledge each other respectfully.
The next component is the safe touch element. This is something that is taught at the preschool from the very beginning of the year, and it is begun by the teacher leading and demonstrating and showing the children how it works. So they greet each other around the circle in some form of safe touch. So it may begin by the teacher with a child practicing this, so it might be an elbow to elbow touch, particularly now we're in this COVID world. But prior to this, they could do a soft high five or a hand clap or a wave. And it began by being led by the teacher to teach the pressure and how softly or how hard to press or push or touch. And then they've worked throughout the year to scaffold this and support this to move on to it being student-led. And eventually towards the end of the year, they'll work towards it being individual choice options around the circle with the type of touch that they use.
The treasure box is another fantastic resource that we use. It gives the children an opportunity to touch and feel and smell and listen to different objects. In the centre of the box there you can see a used perfume bottle, and the children love opening it up and smelling. There's also different textures, so there's small pearls and larger stones for the children to hold and touch, cold stones, shells in there for the children to listen to, and some beautiful old jewellery. And they all treat it with the utmost care, and it's an absolute joy for the children to play with.
We talk about the importance of grounding for children who have experienced trauma, and grounding as opposed to mindfulness or as opposed to putting them into a state of potentially of silence or quiet, which can often be re-triggering because it's been at this particular time that the trauma has been or has been about to occur. So the treasure box provides a beautiful opportunity to draw their senses to attention. So the perfume forces that sense of smell and brings you into the here and now. And the noise and the jingling of some of the beads together does the same thing, but again for a different sense. The book Happy, about what we've come to call the feeling fish, is a resource that when I came to Hendon Preschool they had purchased. And when we looked at it together, there were so many connections regarding trauma-informed practice and connections with the child protection curriculum. But fundamentally, it was about teaching emotional literacy. And I really believe that if we can teach children in preschool the basics of emotional literacy, they will go into school better equipped and into life better equipped to be able to then, after naming these different emotions, being able to work towards regulating and managing them.
We spend a lot of time with the happy feeling fish and looking at the emotions and the features of the fish. And we gave the children an opportunity to create their own fish and write what their fish was feeling. It gives a really strong insight into their world as well. I'll give you a few minutes to have a look at some of the fish that the children have created.
So this is an example of how Hendon Preschool have used the feelings fish in terms of the window of tolerance, or some people might call it the learning zones. They're really quite similar, but what we're looking at is that middle band, regardless of the colours that you use, that middle band being where the child is in their best place to learn. I'd really like to acknowledge that the top band is not necessarily a negative band, and that there are times when we're going to go up into this heightened zone which are entirely appropriate. So for example, if your friends threw you a surprise birthday party and they jumped out and called out surprise, you might be quite heightened, but it's a really positive thing as well. We don't always need to associate that top band with being red or being negative. And likewise for the bottom band, like there is always a time and a place for being quite calm and quite, in a way, quite low in our arousal state. You don't want to be up in that zone at the top when you're ready to go to sleep at night. So each of them serves a particular function, but generally at school and at preschool, we want our children to be around that middle band. So this is a great way about how they've used the fish from the book in terms of the different bands. And I'll get Ayla to talk about how the children use these to identify where they are.
So depending on the child, we've used these in a variety of ways, but one of the most successful has been getting to the children to tap on the fish on their arrival and on their departure. And this gives the educators an opportunity to see where the kids are feeling and an opportunity for us to check in with them during the day to see how they're going.
And I think when you began this, I remember some of the teachers talking about modelling it, so tapping where they felt as
Definitely.
well they were.
That's right, absolutely.
So in an individualised sort of planning wave or level, you could have one of these for particular children that had their own fish that they had designed, like we saw previously from the illustrations provided, if you really wanted to personalise it. So taking care of ourselves. At the top, you can see a quote from the floor book that the preschool use. And I really like that we can't practice compassion until we treat ourselves kindly first. And self-awareness equals self-care. So there's a few things here that as a preschool team they do to take care of themselves and each other.
We know that we can only help others if we take care of ourselves. So that's something that we have to be really mindful of. As a team, we meet weekly for staff meetings and we talk through, on top of our planning and programming, but we also check in with each other and reflect as a team. We have shared lunches. We eat lots of chocolate. We also have a private Facebook Messenger chat group where we talk about non-preschool related topics. We mostly work part-time. And I think the crucial one is the final point is that we all step in and up for each other when needed.
I've definitely been at the preschool where there's been times where the educators and the ECWs have been really struggling and they've been able to have that capacity to take a breather, to take a moment, to go and get a drink of water and to then be able to re-enter the space in that calmer state of mind. There are a number of other documents and supports, both within the department and externally as well, that support that self-care, particularly when we're dealing with trauma. One of them is the practice guide that the Australian Childhood Foundation has created. They're a partnering organisation, so one of the 3 providers currently for the department in terms of trauma-informed practice. This is a fabulous guide to use perhaps within your PDP reflections with a line manager. There's self-reflection tools in there as well. There are tools to look at where you sit on that continuum of compassion fatigue all the way through to burnout. There are resources and there are a whole lot of strategies for addressing and being aware of your own well-being. The Employee Assistance Program is another option. A lot of people don't realise that they can access this or their immediate family members free of charge for up to 6 sessions each year, and all costs are covered by the Department for Education. So there's a whole list there of different areas that they can provide support for, and they can be personal or work related. At this point, the department has extended the amount of providers in this space, and you can access them on the intranet, and you can actually choose your provider. They all have a different specialty or area of expertise, so it's worth looking into that before you choose which provider you'd like to access. In terms of other resources in this space, we now have some national guidelines for trauma-aware education, which has been a huge undertaking by the Australian government, but in partnership with Queensland University and the Australian Childhood Foundation. You can access these online, and they've been critical in terms of supporting our department commitment in terms of trauma-aware education. The department's commitment around trauma-informed practice in education is part of a 4-year funding commitment, and it sits currently predominantly within our Engagement and Wellbeing Directorate based in Flinders Street. It's also in response to the Nyland Child Protection Systems Royal Commission. If you'd like to make a referral to the behaviour support coach for your preschool or school, you can contact your local support services office and ask to be put through to the provider. They can offer one-to-one consults either via phone or in person. They can take individual student referrals. They can take teacher referrals if you're wanting to develop a particular area of your work like trauma-informed practice. They can look at whole class referrals. So like at Hendon Preschool, looking at environmental modifications and supporting the whole cohort. They can also do whole school referrals. And they can also complete some partnership referrals. So if as a whole partnership, for instance, if Western Adelaide Shores would like to do this kind of thing like Hendon Preschool has completed, they could do a partnership referral to all participate in this training and development together. There are a number of other T&D requests that you can put in through your behaviour support coach, and you can discuss these individual requests together, such as the online training for managing behaviour, or you can even access free of charge online the Brain Story certification. The Trauma Aware Schools Initiative, as part of the Engagement and Wellbeing Directorate, fund whole of school professional development opportunities to preschools and schools. So this is what Hendon Preschool and Hendon Primary School applied for together, and it funded the Connected Self training and development as well as the reflective practice sessions. The best way to get in contact with this team and make a referral is to have an idea as a leadership team as to where you are on your trauma-informed practice journey and talk together about what might be the best step forward. There are 3 providers, but the Trauma Aware Schools Initiative team will talk through these and develop a really personalised plan with you. There's an intranet link on this slide, or you can call Flinders Street and ask to be put through to their team. The ACF, so Australian Childhood Foundation SMART training, so strategies for managing abuse-related trauma, is a key component of our department's professional development at the moment. So we talked about the online free course, but it goes through all the way from full day sessions to 2-hour SMART training that can be presented by your support services staff, or if you're unable to find one in your area, you can also contact the email address at the bottom of the screen, education.smart@sa.gov.au, and they'll point you in the right direction. The Berry Street educational model is a 4-day training model. It generally is delivered to leaders first at the site, but you can apply for your whole site to also be Berry Street education model trained. I think it's 4 components in it, and you do get some booklets that provide some great guidance around strategies and practice that are really specific to education. If you'd like to take your study a bit further, the Graduate Certificate in Developmental Trauma, whilst being quite a big time commitment, is such a valuable one. I completed this before supporting Hendon Preschool, and I don't think I could have supported them to the extent I did without this. It occurs over a year, and it's a mixture of face-to-face and in-person. There's now 2 different providers in this space, and you can discuss this again with the team in Flinders Street around that Trauma Aware Schools initiative. Finally, we'd just like to finish off with a message of hope. I think sometimes the people that we feel safest with are the ones that we expose a myriad of emotions to, and sometimes the most extreme emotions. This doesn't mean that we think badly of them. If anything, it's the people we think the most highly of that we're the most vulnerable with. And kids are like this too.
As educators, we have the opportunity to expose children to safe and trusting adults. This experience in preschool can impact significantly on how a child enters relationships when going to school with both peers and adults. It might not feel like you're making a difference, but hold on to the hope that you are making a difference to their future.